Lindsay here, the Frugal Crafter, and today I have a really fun home decor project for you. We're going to refinish this little table. It's a cute little table. It's probably about, no more than a foot wide and probably about 20 inches long. It's meant to sit next to like an easy chair and hold books. And I just threw a couple DVDs in here. Actually, they're stamp cases, just to kind of show you how books would go in there right along that shelf. I thought this would be really cute in one of my daughter's bedrooms next to their reading chair, just because it gives you a nice place to keep the books that you're currently working on. And you always need more space for books, at least if you live in this house you do, because we're all avid readers. This video is brought to you by Lava Soap, and I'm going to have a link in the video description so you can find a retailer near you. And the reason that I wanted to mention Lava is that not only are they a sponsor, but I use this every day pretty much. I have a cake of this under my kitchen sink anytime I've been using inks or paints, and like you get paint stuck on your fingernails. It is so hard to remove, or you get your fingers stained with spray inks. This stuff will take it off without drying your hands, and so I appreciate them sponsoring this video, and I also want to let you know what a great product it is. I've been using it for years and I totally recommend it. So without further ado, let's clean this off and then start painting. The first step whenever you do any painting project is to make sure your surface is ready. And since I'm going to be using chalk paint, all I have to do to get this surface ready for paint is to spritz it with some water and wipe it down with a paper towel or a rag. You just want to make sure that it's clean and dust free. And I'm going to be using a combination of some chalk paint I have lying around. Basically, I'm using up dribs and drabs of stuff from other projects. I've used a lot of different brands. My favorite is the Home Decor Chalk by Folk Art. I just find it covers a little bit better. And I'm going to mix those two colors together. I've got a light blue and that dark teal, and I'm going to just apply a coat over the whole piece of furniture. I had done the legs in the paler blue, which was a Martha Stewart chalk paint, but it was kind of streaky, so I just decided to go over the entire thing with this pale teal mix, which covered really well. I let the furniture dry overnight before starting the gel printing process, and I've got a variety of gel printing plates from a couple different companies. I have the Jelly Arts printing plates and also the gel press plates. I couldn't really tell the difference between the two of them. You can use whatever you have, and I'm going to be applying these smaller plates to stamp blocks, and the larger two plates, I have a 5-inch square and a 6-inch circle. I'll be putting those on large pieces of plexiglass, so I have something that I can use it kind of like a jumbo stamp. So to ink these up, what you want to do is just put out a couple drops of paint and then brayer them on. So what I have here is a plastic rolly cart that I'm using as a taboret. I have it over to the right hand side of the table so I can kind of sit between the table I'm painting and my workspace with my jelly plate, and I can transfer paint over there. It just gives me a nice place to work. And I like this method of putting a piece of like tempered glass over my rolly cart because I can drop all my paint lids underneath there so I don't lose them. So what I'm going to be doing is using stencils and these printing plates to create some really interesting patterns on my table. Now, if you don't have jelly plates, you can do a very similar project here, a very similar look, simply by stenciling through your stencils with a paintbrush. Now, if you look at that polka dot pattern that I have there, it's pretty opaque, but I decided that it didn't have that pop of color I want, so I'll be adding white to my paints from now on to get them a little more opaque. I found out that ghost printing on furniture did not look quite as good. I don't really see the detail that I would get on paper, and the surface of my table is a little warped, so it's not working that well to get a really good ghost print, but it works really great with the stencils, so that's what I recommend. I'm now going to speed up the video because this gets really repetitive and would be pretty dull after a while. On these first layers, you're pretty much just covering up the surface, so don't feel bad if it's a hot mess. You're definitely going to hit the hot mess stage. And since it's a large space, the hot mess stage kind of hangs around a little longer than you might expect. And you can also clean off the brayer or add larger patches of color just by rolling the brayer on there. And you just keep adding until you get a look that you like. If you get to a point where it starts to feel very much the same, you need to add a little contrast. So here I'm using some bright yellow, that's yellow and white, and I am both gel printing and also using the brayer. So anytime you feel like you've gotten everything like too much the same, vary the color temperature. So if you have a bunch of blues and purples and greens, maybe use some pinks and yellows. But try not to grab new colors. Once you've started like with your 6 or so tubes of paint that you're going to work with, keep mixing from those so that you end up with some color harmony. Now, I'm not sure if I like this after I did it, but I decided that the shelf on the bottom, I would go ahead and add some color right from the brayer. I thought that gave it kind of a funky, artsy twist. You could leave that off if you want to. It's completely up to you. I tend to be a little daring. It's only paint. You can always paint over it later, especially when you're gel printing. These techniques are very flat. You're not going to have a lot of ridges, so you will be able to bring that back to, you know, a solid color again if you wanted to. I'm using this pack of inspirational word art stencils that I got from Faber-Castell about a month and a half ago. I ordered them online. I got them because I thought they'd be really fun for craft projects with my daughters because they love those kind of inspirational quotes. And this one says beautiful, and I thought that would be great to go in my daughter's room. I simply used a makeup sponge and some white to stencil that on, and I used a gel plate as my palette, so that's another great use for them. I think it's a great idea to repeat design elements whenever you can, so I took this star stencil, which was one of the stencils I used in the gel printing stage, and I actually used it to stencil stars from opposing corners on the top, and I'm using bright white again because I want these to really stand out. These are my final layers. So whereas I mixed the white to make other colors opaque as we were doing our gel printing, I used it straight on to do the beautiful, which is the focal point, and also my stars. And then I'm also going to do some of those stars on the shelf underneath. This next technique is one that I regretted as soon as I did it. I just took a brayer loaded with orange and hit the legs with color, but then I ended up liking it. So sometimes you just have to sleep on one of your design elements and just realize that if you really don't like it in the morning, you can always paint over it. There are some flat areas on either end of the shelf, and I thought that would be a nice area to add some pattern to, but since it's kind of an awkward area and the legs actually come out so this panel's recessed, you're much better off to use a small stencil and a cosmetic sponge to do your stenciling there. I wanted the quote I stenciled on the top of the table to have a little more prominence, so I just took my darkest color of paint, which was the purple, and I thinned it down with some water, and I added a drop shadow. Since the paint was thinned down with water to make it more transparent, you still see the beautiful patterns underneath, but it just gives that a little extra pop. If you end up going over some of the letters by accident, you could wipe them out with a wet paintbrush, or you could always just repaint them in later. I laid a piece of scrap paper over my words and spattered on some of that same purple paint just to give it a little bit of an artsy flair. And after splattering purple on both sides, I decided to speckle on some white, and I didn't bother masking for that because if any white went on top of the words, it really wouldn't matter. I'm really happy with the way the table is looking at this point. My hands are a mess. I've got to go wash my hands and also clean up my area, and I'm going to let this dry overnight so that I can varnish it in the morning. So I just wanted to let you see how messy my space is. I've got stencils lying around everywhere, and I don't typically clean my stencils if it's acrylic paint. I'll just stick them back in the bin when they're dry. I do need to clean up my paintbrushes, and I need to clean up my jelly plates because the gel plates will get ridges on them if there's like thick paint on there, and I think that affects the printing quality. So I'm going to take those, soak them in the water, clean my hands with a lava soap, and then we'll see everything tomorrow when we do our varnish coat. Okay, it's the next day, and let's take a look at our project all dried. This is the tabletop. Beautiful. I think it's beautiful. I don't know about you, but I like all these crazy colors here. Of course, if you want to change anything, make it your own, obviously do that. I'm not sure if I actually like the spattering after it was all dry, but I don't know. I mean, that's totally up to you. I decided that I didn't like all the different colors on the legs, so what I did was I took some more of that chalk paint that I had been using, the teal, and then I painted it over just with a brayer, really quick and dirty, and then I took some of that orange, which was just that kind of yellow-orange acrylic paint mixed with white so it would be nice and opaque, and I just dry brushed it on the legs because I thought that was a nice touch. Now to finish this, you want to put a clear coating on there. You can choose whether you want it satin or gloss, completely up to you. I'm going to go with a gloss just because it gives it a little more protection, and this is going to go in a kid's room. And I'm going to use polyacrylic, which is a water-based varnish. And the way I decide whether I want to use a water-based or an oil-based, because you can use an oil-based varnish on top of acrylic as long as it's your last layer, I go by what kind of colors I have. If I have cool, bright, crisp colors, I want to use a water-based because that's not going to alter those colors. They're going to stay nice and fresh and bright. If I was doing like earth tones, or I had stained the wood underneath, and I had a lot of warmer tones like browns, yellows, reds, just, you know, warmer, earthier colors, then I would use the polyacrylic polyurethane because that would give it a even warmer glow to it and just kind of intensify those warm colors. Polyurethane just has kind of like a slightly yellowish warm cast as it ages over the wood, so just keep that in mind. So if you're going over earth tones, the oil-based polyurethane works great. If you're going over something really bright and poppy or cool in color like this, then go with the polyurethane. And if you're using the water-based polyurethane like I'm using today, the polyacrylic, you want to use a synthetic brush. Nice smooth, look for the smooth blonde bristles or smooth white bristles. They're plasticky. If you are using an oil-based polyurethane, you want to use a natural bristle brush. And when you're purchasing brushes for those different types of things, it'll tell you what they're best for. So when in doubt, read the package on the brush. And then for cleanup, I can clean up my polyurethane, my water-based polyurethane, which is soap and water. If I was using the oil-based polyurethane, I would need to use mineral spirits or some other solvent to clean it and then clean it up with soap and water. So you really do want to make sure you protect your brushes because they will last you a lifetime if you use them properly. So you just want to apply a smooth, thin coat. You might want 2 coats depending on how the first one covers. Sometimes I notice that I miss a few spots when I'm varnishing, so then you want to just give it another coat. I like to also use a smaller brush if I'm doing like the legs or any like smaller edges. And also the smaller brush is really good if you want to go and get any drips as you're painting, because sometimes like with a bigger brush, especially on the edges where you have those router details, it can catch the varnish because the varnish is a little thin and it can cause drips. So you want to get those drips while they're wet so that you don't have anything you have to pick off later. You may want to lightly sand it before you put a second coat on. Again, that's up to you. Just give it a decent coat so that it will be protected, and that's really all you have to do. I want to thank you for watching today. I want to thank Lava Soap for sponsoring this video. This stuff really is great. I wish they made it for clothes because I get so much pain on myself when I'm creating. If I could rescue my clothes as easily as I can rescue my hands, that would be fantastic. And you can find their products at a retailer near you. I'll have a link in the video description to help you out. And until next time, happy crafting!